All right, here we go.
What's good, everybody? I'm Robert Dickens Jr.
This is Ryan Reed.
This is Elanders Frazier.
This is John Gaal, and you're listening to Volta.
Changing the conversation
For percussion educators,
designers,
and performers.
All right, what's going on, everybody? This is Robert Dickens Jr. I'm with Elanders Frazier, John Gaal, and Ryan Reed. We are the Volta crew. Welcome to another episode. And this episode, we are talking about... Wait, what are we talking about? Production schedules, timeline, seasons, something. What's the actual title?
Timelining a season is the title.
Timelining a season. All
yeah,
right,
one job to do, Rob. Come on.
One job.
Look. You know the intro was pretty banging, except I just fumbled at the end. You know, it's like Auburn football.
Oh.
Or the Falcons.
Can we talk about the
Georgia
New York
team at all?
Jets? Can we talk about the New York Jets?
You know what? I have to take that back. I was gonna say any Georgia team, but the Braves did just win the World Series. So
And the Dogs are undefeated right now.
The Dogs are currently undefeated.
Hey, it's a good year for Georgia right now.
No, Falcons still suck.
Yeah, the Falcons still suck. Georgia is always undefeated until they get to the SEC championship most times anyway. So, but honestly, as an Alabama fan, I don't feel as confident as I usually feel because we've just been playing, a little whack. But maybe this is Georgia's year, possibly.
It might be. Hey, a lot of energy coming off the Braves, so
yeah.
Maybe the Hawks will put it to everybody this year too. Be a full.
Maybe that's it. You know what? Maybe the Braves had a great season timeline that allowed them to get to the World Series and be successful.
I like that. Like that segue.
Right back in there. So, yeah, I love talking about season timelines and stuff like that just because I am a big planner. I joke with my colleagues all the time and be like, hey, well, we want to do this next year. And I'm like, dude, I'll have the next 3 years of rehearsal notes like ready to go in the next 2 weeks. And I literally at sometimes like write the entire rehearsals out for an entire season in a Google Doc. That's just because I just like planning. But I think it's a really effective way for us to kind of like vision cast, but also, kind of make sure that everything progresses the right way. I think the first thing that I'm thinking about when planning out a season is my own self-awareness and how much I can teach at one time, and also how much the students can handle at one time. So I'm thinking, obviously, I always want to think with the end in mind. For indoor, maybe we're thinking about our circuit championships or WGI. For marching band, we're thinking about our last contest. For our concerts, we're thinking about whatever that concert date is, and just kind of planning back. Like, how much time do I need to teach this information? How much time do they need to absorb the information so that it can be at the level that we want it to be at? So my first question for all of you guys is, how did you come to that process of knowing how long it's going to take for you to teach something and for something to get to a certain point? Because I imagine you all have been teaching for such a long time and to such a degree that at least like you kind of have a really good idea as to like what you can accomplish in a certain amount of time.
To chime in first, I think it's always been trial and error for me. I think in the beginning it was a lot more trials and a lot more errors, if you will. But starting with trial and error and just, I've always had a passion and a personality to see how far I can take something, even if it seems, I don't want to say outlandish, but I want to say even if it seems like a big stretch goal, right? And ideally, what the students, I don't think, always understand, and sometimes they do, is even though this is encapsulated to one season for them, this is the evolution of their program. And I've always told students that even though we're trying this way this season, what you do in this season is going to reflect and reverberate in the school's history for seasons to come. So, at the time when I was doing those things, sometimes, when we give the first hint of the show, replay the first segment of music, sometimes it's like, what in the world are we doing? But 6 years down the road, it's like, man, that was such a great group. And I'll say, funny story, what you didn't know was at the time, that group didn't want to have anything to do with that show. Like they just, at that first entry point, they were really suspect about what are we getting ourselves into. But once we go through the formula of the season and we start checking off those boxes, because I'm a list checker too, probably not to the degree that you plan, Rob, but I do try to at least stay a couple weeks ahead. I think keeping, the end game in mind, and I absolutely agree with that point, is starting from where you want to finish. And then backing back up there is where I've always started. And then going into the next season. So when we're talking about after something's completed and I'm pre-planning, now the part that I really love doing more than anything in the world is dissecting the previous and breaking it down to its like the most granular, piece of sand, and then saying, okay, how can I make what we did last year even better given new resources, new students, a different talent level because we've gotten stronger, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How can I take that and now put that into fruition for the next group to be even more successful? That's the part I love so much. And I think sometimes it's a detriment to me too, is because I love it so much. Sometimes I'm still dissecting in the process when I should be doing a little more planning. And sometimes I get caught up a little bit. So, and I think it's important to say that because when you are planning a season, you have to focus on the here and now and what you have in front of you. Because if you're too far ahead in the future or too far in the past, you may be neglecting things that are happening right in real time. So I think to answer your question though firmly, a lot of trial and error has made me build a process that I'm comfortable with, that I know can be executed even if I fall behind. Like I know with my process, I can still execute it even if I fall behind because of how I set up from day one. So,
yeah. Elanders hit it on the head with the trial and error thing, and a lot of that is because, especially at the high school level, every year is a brand new year. We restart every year. We get a new incoming class. We graduate seniors, so it's I don't think of it as dissecting, but I think of it as comparing to like I try to compare. When we start a new season, what did this group start like on the first rehearsal day compared to the first rehearsal day or the first couple rehearsals of the last season? And based on that, I have a pretty good idea of where they should be able to get to, how much work it'll take to get them there. Now, can that be adjusted based on, you got a group of kids that have a better work ethic or a less desirable work ethic? Yeah, those things can all be adjusted, but you can kind of take a snapshot at the beginning, the middle, and the end of every season and just always compare back to those and be like, all right, we're on track, or all right, we're a little bit behind, or all right, we're just like, there's been seasons where it's like, all right, we're not going to be bad, but we're not going to be where I want to be. And there's no point in trying to catch up because that's only going to stress the ensemble out more. Like, and that's one thing that I keep in mind when I'm doing all these comparisons is like, these kids are having stress outside of our ensembles. So it's like, all right, if we get a little bit behind, let's just maybe redirect the course a little bit, not take a hard left, but just take a soft left. Okay. And just trial by fire, because again, you're not going to, very rarely is a season going to end up the way you thought it was going to on day one.
Adaptation.
It ends up being a version of what you think it's going to be, but I don't think it's ever going to end up, or at least in my experience, it has very rarely ended up at the high school level being exactly what I planned it to be. Now in terms of like planning for each rehearsal, I always try to just stay one rehearsal ahead. So I'll take notes before and after rehearsal of like, all right, this is how much we got done. And based on that, this is how much I want to get done in the next rehearsal, and then the next rehearsal, and then the next rehearsal. So I'll look at like, teaching front ensembles, especially for marching band. I'm like, all right, we're going to teach 3 scales today, and we're going to put all 3 of those scales in these 3 exercises. And then we're going to, next rehearsal, review those scales and learn 3 more, and this and that, and do 4 mallet skills, whatever we need to. But it's all kind of like this class is going to create what the next class is, and the next rehearsal, and the next rehearsal, and the next rehearsal, so on and so forth. So I'm not a huge like plan way out in advance outside of like a show and a whole season layout of like, once I know where my show dates are, then I'm like, all right, this has to get taught here. This has to get taught here. And we'll talk about this later, I think. But it's like this much by here, this much by here, this much by here, this much by here. So that's where I do a little bit more planning. But in terms of like instruction, it's like one day ahead of the kids, just to be like, all right, so I can react instead of being like, well, this is what I'm locked into. And if I change this one thing, it shifts my whole next month. I don't want to get worked up over that. So I try not to stay so far planned in advance that it stresses me out to know that we didn't hit a goal or whatever.
John?
Well, for me, to be honest, I haven't had as much experience having to plan out an entire year's worth of education or shows or whatnot as you all, because I stepped into the public school teaching when COVID hit, right? So that was already a completely different situation. So I would say this is my first year officially in the public school realm, trying to figure out, okay, how do I plan for et cetera, et cetera. And with me not being the top director and kind of really helping the main guy, I'd say communication is very, very important for those that are assistants or techs. Just making sure you're communicating to the person above you and making sure you're just checking in with them, make sure they're staying on top of their stuff and knowing, okay, what are your goals and expectations for this ensemble or this group of students. And luckily, unfortunately, I've had a lot of those conversations with my director, my friend at my school. And it may not be so much as we need to win sweepstakes or get this level of achievement for this competition or whatnot, but more of like, okay, the kids overall, since coming back from the pandemic, they need to be able to play these scales and have this type of tone quality, et cetera, et cetera. And that's hard in Texas, especially if you don't have a strong foundation already set, because Texas is very much about pushing the limit from an education standpoint as well as a musical standpoint. And so many bands that, if they weren't affected by COVID and they just kept on pushing, they're still at the top of their game, maybe a little bit less in the skill set level, but they're still winning those trophies, and the district and the administration still pushing, like, you need to have all your kids doing region music, and if you're not going the area, you're a terrible director. They're not saying that word, but you know what I mean. They're still pushing it like nothing's ever happened, right? Because they have someone breathing down their back having to do something, et cetera, et cetera. So I say that all to say is I really liked what you guys said of having to take a step back and really kind of using trial and error. You do need to get that big view and kind of scope in. And I found myself when I was planning for the summer band camps, I would get in the nitty gritty real quick. I'm like, okay, I need an hour and a half doing these fundamentals, and I need an hour of this, and we'll take a 30-minute break here, and blah, 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 blah. And I had to catch myself a couple of times, all right, like, hey, John, you're getting too much into the minute-by-minute detail, which I'm really good at when I'm at Southwind. Like, I plan things to the minute. You guys know that. What do I want to accomplish by Friday? If we're going to do a performance Friday, what needs to be happening? Okay, they need to be able to do forward, backward marching, maybe some slides, hold notes. Let's do 8 on the hand. Okay, let me work my way back. And like everyone else said already, you got to trial and error. And really the biggest thing is just time. The older you get doing this activity, the more mature you're going to get. the more opportunities you're going to have to build up your middle school and maybe your high school program. So expectations are set very clearly and leadership is already well developed. But as you're building a program, it's just going to take a lot of time, and you're going to get hit. You're going to burn more in the fire, I guess you could say, but you'll learn. So,
Yeah, I totally agree. I think my process is a lot of trial and error too. And I feel like the more the seasons go along and the more I'm with the same groups, the more accurate I am with my timelines. I really would like to talk to everyone about, because I'll give mine before we go, but I was thinking about landmarks. So these are just kind of posts that you pass within a season of where you want to be and things that you know that you have to do every time, right? You know, you got to get the whole show out there at some point in time. You know, you got to start doing full concert runs. You know that the kids have to have the fundamentals to be able to approach the music properly. Um, I I'm interested to know what your timelines are as far as things like that. Um, I know for me, for the winter, just speaking, since we're about to go into indoor season, um, I try to have, I would say, maybe about half ish of the show learned by before we go home for Christmas break. Um, and in the past 2 or 3 years, we've had that half of the show on the floor. And then my other goal is usually at the end of January to have the entire show on the floor. Now for me, that's more, we've been able to do that the past 2 years, but for me, that's been also me managing how difficult things are because I have to also respect how long it's going to take to clean those things. And my personal process is during the season, as students are learning to perform, I want them to be just learning how to perform, just learning how to clean, just learning how to refine, and not learning new material if I can help them not learning new material. So what are some of you guys like timelines or things that, because I know that you guys have all had groups that are different skill levels, some kids move faster than others. Like what are some general things, timelines that maybe you used in your mind of like, I can gauge where we are in a season by like, this is a checkpoint, this is a checkpoint, etc.
Um, I think the first thing that I want to try to balance out is, once I know the group is set, which, I've typically always tried to audition every group. And the reason why I'm a firm believer in auditioning a group for regardless of season is because it's a level set. It's a level set for me. It's a level set for them to understand exactly where they're at before we get ready to start. So even when we would pass hands from outdoor marching band to concert season, etc., we had a level set. With a concert group, our level set was usually their all county auditions, to where I would treat their all county auditions and their placement, and we would place them in the ensembles based on that, because they all had to learn the same music. They all had to go through the same pressure cooker of the person with the back turned listening to them play whatever they're going to play on snare, mallets, and timpani. And we would use that to separate out the groups between wind ensemble, symphonic band, concert band. Because their preparation at that point was the same for all of those auditions, and usually they take place mid-October, late October, somewhere around there. Transitioning from fall to winter, we would always hold auditions again. Now, I typically always go into an audition process knowing exactly kind of who I want, but the level set process allows students to functionally know how they're doing from one season to the next, knowing that if I ended the fall season this good, then my audition for the winter season should be even better than it was when I auditioned for the fall. If my audition is at the same standpoint that it was in the fall, then I didn't really really get that much better over the course of the fall season. And then it makes it a lot easier for me to justify the decisions that I'm going to make. So when we talk about the years where I had to size down from like 6 or 7 snares down to 3 or 4 snares, those 3 that got cut off were never feeling inadequate because of their audition. They knew exactly where they stood because they knew the progress that they made from fall into winter by going through that audition process. And if even for the kids that I switched around instruments and stuff, I would still take them through an audition. So we usually would hold auditions for, a week to 2 weeks to make sure that we've got everybody in the right place from a marching, maneuvering, playing standpoint. And then, kind of reaching out from there. When I'm thinking about like, okay, the minutia of how I want, where my checkpoints are throughout the course of a season, right? Once I get through auditions, my next checkpoint is always going to be what's the largest gap of time that we have that we're not going to play. In the summer, it's not as much of a big deal as it is in the winter because typically once you start the fall, the summer season, say you start end of May, something like that, there's never really a gap. Sometimes there can be a little summer gap, like in the end of June, if you don't rehearse all the way through June, from like freshman drill camp or whatever to when you actually start doing like summer rehearsals. So, but, there's always some kind of gap space. And it's like, okay, what do I want to have accomplished? If I'm going into a fall season, typically I will want the entire exercise packet under hands, meaning that we have looked at everything so that when they go on that break, now they can start personally refining where they're at before we come back together in July, beginning of July. Usually it's after the 4th of July to start putting, the fire behind what we're doing in prep for the show music, right? For the winter program, usually it's kind of trying to get, I say my checkpoint is really, okay, what do I want to have done by Thanksgiving? What do I want to have done by Christmas? If we can get music learned prior to, then we will go ahead and start learning drill. I don't like being in a situation where I have to teach music and drill at the same time because kind of to the point that you made earlier, Rob, I want the focus of cleaning to just be cleaning. So it's like I want to dissect where we are musically so that when they get to the floor, they've already got that behind them. And it's not they're trying to frustratingly learn 2 things at the same time. Because I've had to teach it both ways when I wasn't in charge of a program to where it's like, hey, sheets fresh off the printer. We also got drill emailed in tonight. We're going to try to learn all of it today. And I'm like, oh, it puts kids at such a serious disadvantage because a lot of the times if they don't know the music well, it's hard for them to really connect the dots. You know what I mean? And it's so much easier if they have that music a little bit farther ahead to where you can connect the dots with the drill. And then a lot of the times when you come off of that break and we take that first camp rehearsal, because usually when you come off the break, you usually have a camp. In the summer, I always try to do it on like a Saturday, the first week that we're back in rehearsals. In the winter, we always try to do it the first week that we're back in school is a camp to really level set and to say, okay, where are we at the end of this break musically and visually? And that's going to let me know how much more we have to teach to get us ahead going into the next camp or subsequent camps, or then backdating from that first show to say, okay, based on where we're at the end of today, this is probably what we're going to be doing at the first show in the next 3 weeks, right? If we do more, that's going to be entirely up to y'all. But from a landmark standpoint, I can usually kind of eyesight out first show, mid-regional, circuit championships, WGI championships to say, okay, if we're here by here, then we're going to be okay. Anything further than that, we're golden. If we're here by here, we're going to be okay. Anything further than that, golden. If we're here by here, going to be okay. Anything further than that, be golden. And I like setting those 2 to 3 week goals just because setting 2 to 3 week goals, I feel like rarely ever are we disappointed with the progress that we make because we're going to push every single day, right? We're always going to push to achieve more every single day, but setting that reach goal for, 2-3 weeks out, then what it allows me to do is to keep the goal in the back of my head, knowing that I'm going to continue to push them past that goal. And then if we have hangups, meaning that there's some frustration in the pushing, we still get to the goal regardless. And that's kind of like to that point that I made earlier, to where it's like, I know what I'm going, like the kind of energy I'm bringing into the situation every single time. So I know when I'm setting a goal, we're going to reach that goal whether y'all want to get there or not. It's either going to be very frustrating on your end to get to that goal, or we're going to shoot past it because y'all are ready to go too. But we're going to reach the goal. And I have always told my groups that I don't set goals that I can't achieve. And it's just, I've gotten too set in my ways to know that if I set a goal, it's a non-negotiable, meaning that this is a goal that we're setting, we have to achieve it. We don't have a choice in the matter. Our livelihood depends on it. And people can treat livelihood however they want, whether it's their money, it's their life, it's their family, whatever you want. But our livelihood depends on reaching this goal, and we dare not even speak it into existence if we're not going to do everything in our power to reach it. And then, setting up those landmarks along the way, and the kids understanding the mission and what we're trying to get accomplished, I think really it becomes less of my goal and it becomes more of the ensemble's goals. And even if I got removed from the situation, they still have the blueprint to get themselves there. So
that's really good. I think a couple of things that I picked up that you said in there is allowing those goals to become the ensemble's goals. Like, I think that's really, really, really good, because the students start to pick up that momentum too. And I think that this is important for all instructors and directors and band directors or anyone. Like, the more our students see what our goals are, then the more they can continue to self-assess. I think sometimes and I find myself in this situation, particularly in class, because class is so long as far as like a school year, because it's just every day, getting frustrated that students don't necessarily self-assess. And it seems like they don't really have any idea as to where we are. But that's kind of on me as a director. That's on the person that's in front of them to say, okay, hey, we have this as a landmark. We have this as a landmark. We have this as a place that we're trying to get to. So now each week has more of a sense of urgency. Each class has a sense of urgency, because you're not disoriented because it's just another day that you're coming to class. You know what I'm saying? And I think that that's something that can be difficult, specifically when you're not talking about just, indoor drum line or marching band where you rehearse once or twice a week. When you're talking about class where you're there 5 days a week, week after week, month after month, it can get bogged down. So I think that having that in front of kids, and then also, making sure that they see that, is very, very, very helpful when it gets, kind of daunting from day to day.
Yeah, so I like to split all, I'm going to call them cycles, just because it can be marching band, concert band, indoor drum line, winter guard, whatever. But like thinking of everything in cycles, and I'll split my cycles into 3 different pieces, which is like a training portion, a learning portion, and then the performance portion. And all three of those portions can overlap. And in fact, they almost have to, especially more so on the like winter and marching band performance ensembles, like winter guard, winter percussion, marching band, the pageantry arts have to overlap a little bit. But you see, like in the class aspect of things, you got to look at your concert cycle and go, all right, the concert's here. When is the first time I want to be doing my run through of the whole concert? For me, it's at least 2 weeks before the concert. Like we need to be able to run the program at least 2 weeks before the concert. It's not got to be it's not got to be concert ready. It's got to be like, we can get through it. It's recognizable. It's good. And then we got 2 weeks to like make it performance ready, which is the perform side of that. And that typically is the smallest portion of the season for me, just because it's the part where it's like, all right, we're done learning, and let's make it like as clean as possible. Let's make sure there's no It's not rough around the edges. Like, we're just cleaning right now. And then in the second portion, you have the learning aspect where you're like learning your concert rep, or you're learning your show, or anything like that. And again, in concert band, in your sit down bands, that's a very easy portion. You're learning notes, you're learning rhythms, you're learning pieces, you're handing out music. You're basically just giving all the kids the information that they need to be successful. In the indoor marching band idiom, it's a little bit different because you're learning, and with how I teach, you're learning and you're performing at the same time. So you learn a little bit, you clean a little bit, you perform a little bit. You learn a little bit, you clean a little bit, you perform a little bit. Which has been successful, and it's very typical up here in Ohio for a lot of groups, where we put everything on slow, but we put it on and clean it, and then we put it on, put the next chunk on. Like there was one season for me, and I'm a concert director. I've done the marching band, I've done the marching drum line a couple times, but even then it was slow. But with like the concert group, there was a year that my group meddled, and we went out to our first show with 45 seconds on, and that was it. But it was more about getting a read of like, okay, in these first 45 seconds, you're going to see every possible skill set that we're going to play in the entire show. Okay? And you're going to see it pretty clean, and you're going to see them play with a lot of fire. Okay? And we went out, and it was more about what is the reaction to what we're doing versus what is the number. Because one year I went to a March regional with like 2.5 minutes on. Screw the penalty. Like, I need to know how well my kids are doing with what they have on right now. Like, I think it's good. Where are we at? Because we know what the rest of the show is going to be as a design team, as an instructional team. Like, we know how it's going to go on based on where we're at right now. But I need to know nationally, where am I in the scale of relevant? And being bad or being less good with more on to not take a penalty, to me, is less valuable than getting a really good raw number and then losing the regional because we took a 6-point penalty or whatever. Like, I'm not in it to win at the regional. I'm in it to win at the championships. So I put things on very slow. It hasn't been a problem yet outside of one season where the ensemble, that was a show that was over programmed, and with what we were doing, we were never going to get the whole thing on as we intended it, and to do that kind of stuff. And that was on me and the guy designing the show. But that's kind of the learning portion of the season. Obviously, again, in the concert realm, that's much easier. You don't have as many performances probably, or any. You're just learning the music. For the pageantry side, it's like learn, clean, perform, learn, clean, perform, learn, clean, perform. But you're not talking about like, it's got to be crystal clear. You're not talking about like emoting. You're not talking about like, go out there, move well, play well, and we'll see where we're at. And then the first portion of the season is obviously the fundamental portion, the training portion, where in marching band and in concert band, that's the longest portion for me because we have time. We have our summer rehearsals. We have our band camp. We have post band camp before the first show, which always seems like an eternity. And it's like, yeah, we're starting to learn the show, but we're really focused on the training. And the hardest thing to get the kids to understand here, because the first show is so far away, is once this portion of the season is over, there is no going back and fixing your training. Like once we hit like real learning and starting to get to shows, that what's done is done. You can't tell me, well, I'll go home and practice it. You will go home and practice the music, but you won't fix the technical flaws that are causing the issues that you have. And that is the hardest thing. That is the hardest thing to get kids to understand, is that the training portion of your season is the most important portion of your season. just like, I told you guys earlier on, we have our percussion ensemble concert coming up. Like right now, we've got some junk in the closet that we're going to make work for the concert. The kids are going to play really well. They're going to sound great. But we got some junk in the closet. So after the concert, we go back to the training portion. Now our next concert cycle will be our concert band concerts, but we're going to go back. We're going to train. We're going to get the skeletons out of the closet, and we're going to do that. But our cycle's over. So our next cycle has begun there. Whereas marching band, once you get through band camp, I mean, that's really where, for me, that learning portion really starts. Like, yeah, you're learning a bunch of show during band camp, but you're still also, because you got 9, 10, 12-hour days, you're still doing a lot of training in that time, But once you get past marching band, once you get to school starting, it's like learn, perform, learn, perform, learn, perform. If it's not good, we got to change it,
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part, is to get kids to understand that. Now, flip it around to the indoor season, that training portion becomes very short because you don't got band camp. And those first shows, you only rehearse 2, maybe 3 days a week if you're most schools. Those first shows at the end of January, beginning of February, they sneak up on you real fast. If you're not ready for it.
Boo. First show.
Yeah. I've definitely had a couple where it's like, oh, where'd that come from?
Hey, I'm not even gonna lie to you. I'm glad to be down here in Georgia, because we don't start until the second week in February.
That's awesome.
So I'm all about it. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, one of the things I was going to ask about too is, have you all seen, after you've been at a program longer, have you seen that training, that you're getting to those other cycles a little bit quicker than you were when you first got to that program? Like, for instance, if let's say you've been there for 5 years and you know what your skill sets are, you know what the warm-ups are, you know what those things are. Have you seen any progress that you're able to progress through some of the training a little bit quicker than you would with a group that maybe you hadn't been there as long and the technique's not as ingrained?
Oh yeah, I do. I will also add to that, though, that I don't make that time shorter. I add more skills to that time. Because if we're not trying to go from, like, ideally we're not trying to stay A class forever. So that training time is where I go, all right, let's start here's a little open skill set. Here's maybe a little inkling of a world skill set that maybe if you go home and practice a little bit or a lot, you can maybe do this one day. So I don't have steadfast times of, like, the training portion is this many weeks and this many weeks and this many weeks, but I try not to shortchange that, because I'm looking long term as well, in terms of, like, I want to be open class in 3 years. I want to be, pushing top end of open class in 5 years. I want to be, whatever. So yes, we get through the same skills faster. I just add more skills over top of them.
Gotcha. Nice.
I feel like it's always been like I don't want to say rinse repeat, but it's almost like a rinse, modify, repeat. Because there's so much experimentation that I think you can do in the training segment that really kind of, like, it's like world is your oyster, do what you want. And I feel like, regardless of the length of time that I'm at a program, during that training segment is where I really get to just figure out what is our process and why do we do things the way that we do, because the sooner that we can understand that, the sooner we can get to making sure that how we learn, just speaking back to Ryan's cycles, how we learn is consistent, and then how we perform and execute is consistent. Is when we can experiment to find out what do the students respond to, how do they approach what we're doing, what are the right words to connect the information to them, so that when we do get into the learn phase, it does move at the rate and scale that we need it to. You know what I mean? And I feel like the training portion has been, I've talked with Rob about this before, where we have non-negotiables. Like, these are exercises that have to be played every year from a fundamental standpoint. I think we've all talked about this before. From a fundamental standpoint, cannot be neglected, even if you wanted to, or you're just going to have a crappy group, just hands down. If they don't have an inner beat tap, you might as well stop playing the marching percussion idiom. If they don't know how to play doubles, it's going to be very difficult for them to emote big moments, right? If they can't play doubles, right? So it's like, we have non-negotiables, right? It's all single strokes. And then just helicopters everywhere, right? So I feel like outside of the non-negotiables is where I really get into the wheelhouse of experimentation, to Ryan's point, to say, okay, we were doing this as an A-class group last year. What can I experiment with this year that shows you what it feels like to be open class, world class, A, B, C, double A, whatever, connotation or group that you subscribe to, but how you can start, introducing that program to different concepts. So it doesn't matter if it's on the same level, but it's different as long as it's different, right? It can be different and more, or it can be different laterally, but as long as it's something that is challenging them. And I think that speaks to us as educators more so than anything, is, are we challenging our students? And I think you have the best opportunity to challenge them in that training segment, when everything's really low stress, because once we get into the learn phase, then the stress becomes a little bit higher. But almost, Ryan mentioned this earlier, we don't know what's going on in their lives. And typically once school starts, that stress level for them students just, Ms. Johnson said, I got to have a paper due every Friday, and you want me to play these doubles clean. I need you to chill. You know what I'm saying? Like we don't know what stressors are now inhibiting our students.
Sorry, I want to put that in there.
Really perform at that high level. No, but that's true, right? Like, we don't know what things are affecting our students once they get into those learn phases, right? Because when are we hitting those phases typically? Right when school starts, right after winter break. You know what I mean? It's like, it's always during those segments to where, like, they get a lot dumped on them in other courses. And, like, we've got to be cognizant and aware of what we're doing, and we should have already set them up for success. So that's why understanding what your training segment is, when you go into that learn cycle, if you will, I'm copping all of Ryan's stuff. I'm just start using this going for it. When you go into that learn phase, they should already know what the expectation is, and then how they properly react, so that it is a cohesive journey, and it's not you dragging them along until we get to, like, repetition and performance, right? Because kind of once you get to repetition and performance, if you haven't already figured out your system and how your students work and how they, it's just going to be a nightmare pull all the way to the end. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then you can forget making modifications at that point, because, you're just thrown right back to the beginning of the learning phase again, as opposed to it being hey, we're just going to modify this real quick. All right, 2 reps. Good. All right, sweet. Let's keep it moving, right? A well-rehearsed group, I think, can handle that. When groups are not well-rehearsed, they don't really understand how to do that. And that training phase is really where you develop their rehearsal standards and how they get from from point A to point B successfully.
Yeah. I would also say, especially as far as, and connecting back to what Ron said about training students, and maybe this is maybe a little bit more so what I was thinking about when I'm talking about that training cycle being a little bit shorter, especially as far as indoor is concerned. An A-class group is going to need more shows than a world-class group. Mm-hmm. Because the world-class group already has a certain set of performance skills that they can already get to that back end of what Ryan was talking about, of performing. And, those younger groups, they're going to need way more time in that training aspect, because the training and the skills haven't become innate. You know what I mean? Like, you go to a world-class group, for the most part, if they play something, they know how to play articulation. You know what I mean? They know how to play something and, with dynamics and whatever. It doesn't matter if they know where the drill is going. Like, their hands know how to do that consistently. So I think it also comes down to what skills do you value most as a director? And that may change over the course of time that you're with a group, or for each group, it may be a little bit different. I think for me in the past few years, the things that I valued the most are students' flexibility, and their ability to adapt as a performer. I know that some people kind of some people think of what the show's going to be, and they have a very clear concept of what it is, like right from the get-go. I most of the time have a big picture idea of what the show is about. And I have sequences and vignettes in my head, but I don't always know exactly how I'm going to transition from thing to thing. So for me, I need to see things in context so that I can experiment within the show to be, oh, this is what the show is about. And this is why this moment hits here and this moment hits here. So I need to do this to get us to here. Even though all the music is there, all the staging is there, it takes time for me to connect the dots as a designer as well, and to have my best ideas. So I feel like for me, the reason why I value that is because my students are learning my process. I'm learning them. They're knowing, hey, the first few shows, we might not beat everybody. That's okay. We're trying to do this at the end of the season. And true to point, all of the years that I've been at my schools that they've, thankfully medaled any of those years in our class, we've never won every show. Most of the times we get to the end, and then like we, it's kind of a 80s cadets thing. Like, they never really dominate everybody. They just show up at the right time. You know what I mean? And it's like you can't catch them. So I think it's important to know yourself as a director and as a designer, to know your process, because that's going to change your timelines. That's going to change how things operate as well. And you shouldn't try to just, I think some people see successful groups and successful designers, and they just try to copy what they do, but your process may not be theirs. So I think it's important to take all of this and kind of see, where do I fall within this, so that you can find your process, because you can be successful with any different approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it can vary from group to group, from person to person, from situation to situation. If you have one director, the best band directors I've ever worked with have like a plan that they use for their wind ensembles versus their marching bands, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not the same plan, but they know exactly what they need to do in that timeline from a programming standpoint to get those students ready for the concert MPA, or to get the students ready for the marching MPA. Frankly, you know what I mean? They know exactly what they need to work on, when, how long to spend on fundamentals, how long to spend when they're learning drill, when we need to stop learning and then start cleaning, so that it stays on a rotation basis. And all that is them taking the time to think about what they have to get done, and then knowing their personnel enough to know, this is what I can get out of the students at this reciprocative level by this time. And it's, it's got to reciprocate. Like, the amount of push that we're giving has to come back from the students. And sometimes you're pushing at 100, they're only giving 60. Then you're up to 120, now they're pushing 70. Then you're up to 180, and now they're finally starting to get you 80%, which is a B, right? But sometimes you got to know, what point in the season do my students normally get to that 80% push? When do they normally start getting to that 90% push? That way I know, what do I have to do from a training standpoint, from a preparation standpoint. Like, if we're talking about just pre-planning rehearsals and saying, okay, we're going to work on this week. Like John said, from week to week, knowing big picture, I want to get this done by the end of the week. I want to have the first 12 sets of the opener on the field by the end of the week. It may not be completely clean, but it's got to be on the field, right? What do I need to have that accomplished? What has to be set up in place? How much time do we need for marching fundamentals versus learning versus playing, et cetera, et cetera? And planning that scope out, I think that as a teaching's a tough job. It's not for the faint of heart. And it's not for the faint of heart because unlike being a performer, which this is where most performers struggle when they want to transition into teaching, they think the teaching aspect will just kind of happen the same way a performer does. But as a performer, you don't have to plan. All you have to do is show up and be present and learn. And you're kind of really directed in everything that you do. Whereas when you're the planner, you've got 1,000 different models that you've got to dissect to make sure that you tweak the process down so that it is a seamless process for your performers. And it's nothing more frustrating than seeing a new director or a new instructor approach the aspect of teaching the same way they did as a performer. And it's because they don't go in it with the notion that they've got to be 20, and it doesn't even have to be 20, but it's got to be at least 6 or 7 steps ahead of your students. Because if you're in rehearsal and you're like, let me see, maybe let's try this. Your students at that point are already unengaged in what you're bringing to the table at that point. And it's like, and I think we've been talking about the process, but I think that we're now starting to like. I almost want to say I want to understand the mind of a person that's making a process. And being mindful of what your process is, you can't explain it to somebody if you've never thought about it. You can't just show up, right?
Right.
Can't just show up to rehearsal. There needs to be some forethought ahead of it, and that's going to take time. And you have to plan your time accordingly in order to be able to bring that forethought into fruition.
That's good. I think that's really good. I think it's the more I listen to you, everyone here, the more I can see my process a lot clearer, and the more I can see things that I can take from everyone else that I feel like can make things way more successful. You know what I mean? Because I think that's something that's important, is just knowing your process. Then students can trust you in that process because they know how you operate. They know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like they know what's going to happen. Wow. That's really good stuff. Can you, John, can you talk about, from a Southwind perspective? Cause I know that you have, oh my God. I know that you have I know that you're thinking more about the training and like cleaning and just making sure everything's pristine, obviously, because you're a Cavalier. Can you talk about how much time that you would thank you. That you, I guess, when do you put on in your brain that like, okay, we need to stop and start polishing this? You know what I mean? So that we have enough time for this to look at the level that I want this to look at. You know what I mean? Because there's some people that, like Ryan talked about those 3 stages. There are some groups that they'll stay in the learn stage a little bit longer than others. And then there's some groups that are like, no, we got a first show in 2 weeks. We have to stop now and we have to start polishing. We cannot go out and do this at this level. You know what I mean? So can you talk about, I guess, just that process of like, when do you stop and decide, okay, like we got to stop with the learning. This is where we're going to be in 2 weeks. We got to start polishing.
Yeah, Rob, that's an excellent question. And to be honest, I can't give you a specific date of it needs to be exactly 6 days and 42 minutes and 39 seconds before our first show that we need to start moving and do something else.
I'm disappointed, John, that you
I
don't
am
have
disappointed.
that exact time, because that sounds like the most John Gaal thing
It really
that would ever
does.
come out of your mouth. Of like,
I
well,
apologize. I'll
back in
try to be
7
better.
days.
I'm coming off of COVID, so I'm getting back into my flow of things. This year, watch out. I'll get it back going. Don't worry. I don't know. Like, to be honest, at least it's some type of intuition for me. And I don't know if it's just something just comes up. I just start freaking out. I'm just like, okay, we need to clean. We need to go. We're spending too much time on this. And I don't know if that's because spending all days with the kids, I start getting bored of hearing the same exercises over and over again. I'm just like, okay, we need some stuff. Come on. We've talked about this. We just need to start pushing. So to be honest, I can't give a exact answer besides it's kind of some intuition, some type of feeling. I think, though, that intuition for me, at least, comes about when I communicate with the staff at meals and just really just talking to everyone during lunch and dinner and just be like, hey, how was block? What did you guys accomplish? Okay, what do we need to do moving into next block? What are some goals I can start figuring out for perk ensemble, for music ensemble, full ensemble? And of course, we have our caption meetings at the end of each night, and we talk about things that went well and what we need to work on for the next day, etc. But really just communicating with your staff and just seeing how they're doing, because they're in the thick of it, right? Like I work, side by side with Ryan teaching the kids at Southwind, but a lot of times I have the luxury with the amount of staff that we hire at Southwind that I can kind of detach myself from the ensemble and move on and kind of see how everyone else is going or doing, or work with the Elanders on future planning with the truck and Lawrence on other stuff, right? Equipment maintenance, auditions, planning for the road. But by being able to detach, I'm able to re-engage with the staff during those meals to talk and kind of, because they're in the thick of it. Like I said, they get to see the ebb and flow of how the kids are feeling. Are they tired, right? Do we need to push hard? Are they lazy right now, or are they overwhelmed? Now, if you're a director who doesn't have that type of staff in place at Southwind, I would suggest finding times for you to detach from your work, from the kids. You may be practicing every day with your band. It's not a too terrible thing to take a day off and just like, hey guys, we're not going to have rehearsal today, or going and find that mentor or that friend that you can bounce ideas off. Or like, hey, here's what's happening to my kids. Here's what I'm feeling. What do you suggest? Just getting that second opinion may help. So I'm sorry I can't answer with a specific down to the second, because that's what I'm known for. And I'm kind of just going more with gut feeling. But you kind of just have to feel it out sometimes.
Yeah. I like that.
I'll add to one of the things John said. So sometimes with it being intuition, like sometimes it's not just like at the end of the season, it's not just clean stuff. Like we got to just rep it till it's clean and rep it till it's clean and rep it till it's clean. Like I think back to 2019, wherever we were for finals, John, when we had the like front ensemble over off in the forest and we were just repping this like metric modulation thing over and over and over again. It's like, they've played it. We just can't hit it consistently. And we're like, all right, let's just make a change. And again, this is finals week, like open class finals. I think we're like the next day or whatever. We made one simple little change, but never had to rep it again. It was like we took one note out or made one triplet in eighth note or whatever. It was like, oh.
Yeah, it was that descending 16th note run, and they could never get that attack. And yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
And then they got it, and it was like so good.
Yeah, and we looked at each other and we're like, how did we never think of this before? One, and two, like, how many groups would have the guts to like, all right, finals is tomorrow, let's change it. It's not working. Let's just change it. Versus like, it's only like 3 seconds. Let's just live with it.
Well, sometimes, like what we said, you just get bogged down in the thick of it of just teaching the same thing. Sometimes you just need a fresh approach, right? A new mindset, changing the conversation, whatever you want to say. You just need to cut it.
Yeah.
Fire hose that.
Important.
Fire hose it.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's what it is.
I think it's important to, and this is always one of my landmarks, is, and I don't think I've ever said it this way, but the mid-season cuts. It's usually when I come to rehearsal, I stop by Firehouse Subs and get me one of those Firehouse hats. And I was like,
I remember this.
Some of my kids,
you did this over the summer.
I used to call it Water Week. And I was like, hey, anything that don't sound good, this is on the chopping block. You got 1 week. It's about to get cut. So I think, one, that's always a motivator for kids. Two, I feel like it's always a good reminder, like you just said, that like you can always pivot to something else to make it more effective. Because at the end of the day, the kids aren't going to be bashing their heads against the wall because they can't play some, weird pickup or something that they're just not getting. You know what I mean? Like you can always pivot to something else. And I think that's so important for instructors, educators, designers to know, like you don't have to be beholden to what you put on the page if what you put on the page isn't working anymore. Or maybe it didn't work in the context that you thought it was going to work in. You can always change. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I think is important, like John said, to have a different perspective. Sometimes that can be another person. Sometimes that can be not running a full band rehearsal every day for 5 days a week. And you're about to like bash your head against the wall for the clarinets who just can't get it together. Like some days it's going to be, hey, breaking them apart. You know what I mean? Putting them in sectionals, having in-section coaches, telling them that, hey, I'm going to take people off parts, whatever you got to do to be successful and to motivate kids, you have to, because some kids are motivated by different things. Some kids are motivated by, I want to be in the best group. I'm just a kid that I just want to be the best. Some kids are motivated by, well, I don't want something taken away from me. So I'm really going to practice this part now because they're going to say that it was cut. Some kids, are motivated by just getting more attention. Oh, well, they're going to give me more attention and they really think I can do it. I'm going to do it, or some kids are motivated by positive reinforcement of some kind of prize or, oh, if you guys get this, I'm going to do blah, 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 blah. There's many different ways that we can do that. But I think that the key is what John said is about just getting that new perspective from others or just changing up the situation or changing your own conversation a little bit so that you can create a new result.
I do want to say one more thing. We've talked about, timelining a season. Sorry, Rob, you're doing a great job.
That was my segue. It was the end.
I'm the outro. I'm the outro, right?
You got it now.
I do want to dive in real quick into the micro. We've gone super macro on the timeline of a season, but I want to go into at least my approach on the micro when it comes to a rehearsal. And we've talked about this, I believe, on other segments. But when you asked about my perspective when it comes to how I run my ideas for a percussion ensemble, Southwind type of rehearsal, there's a lot of planning that goes in the behind the scenes that I don't think a lot of people realize to make a rehearsal run super efficiently. And I can't take all the credit of like, I just woke up and this is how it happens. This is a little bit from my experience with the Cavaliers, especially my first year marching with them in 2013. Brian Tinkle, I believe, was the caption head, or he was in one of the upper echelon positions, and he helped run percussion ensemble rehearsals. And what I remember from him is he was just super energetic about and very purposeful about everything that was going on, not wanting to waste a single second. And I really took from my experience with that and apply it to my teaching, that you guys have seen my schedules that I've come up with for rehearsals. I have everything down to the minute, especially for water breaks and etc. By having an amazing staff that I can rely on and trust to teach the kids, and lets Elanders and myself kind of take a step back and figure out our plan for our afternoon rehearsal. Just with practice, you're able to figure out, okay, if we're going to rehearse A to C, and we're going to take an hour on this, and then we got to do C to E, and we got an hour of this, and then we got to move. You have to think about all the logistics as well, and communicating to your staff. It's going to take 15 minutes to get, quads that are in this location, snares over here in front ensemble to move. All right, we need to be moving 15 minutes before. We need to make sure we're doing a sound check in the front ensemble. And then at the beginning of that rehearsal, yo, kids, here's our goals for the day. We're going to be going, for me, and I think for many of you guys, I mean, we're all different personalities, but I go high energy, and you guys know this. But we just got to move, because everyone else is rehearsing all throughout the United States, but how you utilize your time, either maximizing your reps, just doing tons of reps, right? Figure out your goals. Is it a rep day? Is it a cleaning day? What's going on? And just communicating that to the kids at the beginning. And then for me, just going high energy, rep. All right, we're going to plan this out for 10 minutes. All right, turn the med on, get that beep, beep, beep going on, go in the subs, go. You got 2 minutes. And I literally have a timer. I'm looking at that time. I'm listening to different things. Okay, that's not clean. I need to making mental notes. I need to write that down, check that out. Oop, Reynolds, watch out for that. I need to write that down real quick. All right, boom. And if you have your staff on board and everyone's buying into the process, it's going to take a while to get the kids on board, right? It's just going to take some time. But if you're going, you can max. You'll be surprised at how much you can get done. And the kids, they feed off of your energy. And you'll be surprised on just how far you can push it when the kids see how much you're investing in on the behind the scenes aspect. So
I would like to say here on Volta Percussion that is my number one takeaway from John Gaal, from working with John Gaal, just in general. There are so many, I don't know, and maybe this is, again, because I'm a planner, but the most exciting rehearsals that I've ever been in are the rehearsals that are run super efficient and everything feels like we're always getting something done. I absolutely love that. I love that efficiency. And that's definitely one of the things that, I think, I don't know if that might have been 2018. Probably 2018, definitely 2019, that I was like, okay, that's at least 4 things I can take back to my high school and be super on point with things. That I think that's just really great.
I appreciate it, man. Man. I do a lot of deep diving in the music, and I realize, okay, these are trouble spots in the quads and the snares, whatever, and I'm communicating with the staff. Hey, how are the sectionals? Oh, they're having issues on these flam drags. Okay, I'm keeping those mental notes for perc ensemble. And another takeaway I learned from the Cavs, and this is kind of more in what Ryan was talking about with the learning, at the end of the learning to now starting the performing phase of stuff, is mid-July, when we're really diving into cleaning stuff. One takeaway I got from Cavs was we would set a goal. It's okay, the goal is Saturday's the performance, right? We got the Georgia Dome, we got the Texas Dome, whatever it's called. If Saturday's the performance, and we start the whole cycle over again on Sunday, then Monday through Wednesday, we're cleaning in sectionals, yada, yada, yada. Wednesday, Thursday, we're doing more full ensemble, and then we're polishing and breaking it down. Make it super clean Friday, so that Saturday's that performance, learning, training, cleaning. There's that, and each week, new goal. And it takes a lot of studying in the music, man, just knowing what you need to hit and communicating. But I appreciate you guys asking me. Sorry I can't give more in depth, but maybe next time, if you guys stay long enough, we'll take out some of our music that we're doing for Southwind or any other group that we're checking out in the future, and we'll break it down like a master class.
Man, been on these okay, listeners, I want y'all to know that John has been watching and listening to master classes for the last couple weeks. So that's his mind is all geared up on. I'm sure he could deliver a master class like tonight if we set him free, but we're not.
My question I've created for myself, because as you guys know, I hate wasting time. And so the question I've written on my whiteboard in my room is, what are you doing today to set yourself up for success tomorrow? And that's like physically, mentally, financially, academically, et cetera, et cetera. And so I try to educate myself a little bit every day. And so I've been watching these master classes, and I've been telling the guys on Volta. I watched the Hans Zimmer. I just finished Danny Elfman. I checked out some stuff on chess and food. And now I'm watching Armani, like a DJ. And so he's creating his own track from scratch. And so that's why I was just talking to these guys. Because Landers got his whiteboard behind him. He was going to write out a timetable of the whole season visually for you guys watching on you. Okay, well, I was hoping you would. But maybe I'll create a plan so you guys can see from 4 to 4:05. We're working on this chunk. From 4:05 to 4:07, we're taking a water break. And 4:07 to 4:13, it's going to take that long to go from field A to field B and etc. But that's what I do. It's crazy. But for those that are listening, if you guys got any ideas on how you plan, you want to share, email us, right? Rob, you know the email better than I do.
VoltaPercussion@gmail.com, of course. And you can always connect with us on Instagram at Volta Percussion and at Volta Percussion on YouTube as well, and any other streaming platforms for podcasts.
Ooh, we own the podcast streams, y'all.
Yeah.
Listening.
Yeah.
We in there.
Yeah, so again, this is Volta Percussion. I'm Robert Dickens Jr., my man John Gaal, Elanders Frazier, and Ryan Reed. We are the Volta crew. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode. Peace.
See ya.
Ka-chow.
See ya.
Cut.